Beauties! Today we're going to talk about my dupe of Realm of Fairies Palette, which was a collaboration between Bella Beaute Bar and sassyfairie. If you want to know what shades I'm using, give this video a thumbs up and let's get started! Friends, as always, we're going to go left to right, top to bottom. I'm going to swatch every single shade. And I'm going to tell you what shade I'm using. And then again, as always, I have some extra shades that I'm going to recommend to you. Let's get started. To dupe our first shade, I chose Cali from Sydney Grace, which is a beautiful light tone blue matte. For the second shade, we have two potential options. The first one is X-Ray from Terramoons. This shade is almost an iridescent multichrome. It looks very light blue in the pan with a hint of purple from some angles. And the second option, if you want something a bit deeper, is Star Sign, also from Terramoons. I chose the photos posted on Bella Beaute Bar's website to figure out what these shades are supposed to look like. And between these two, I think X-Ray is the closest to that shade based on the swatch photos, which made this shade look like a blue with a purple hue. And you can see that X-Ray has that qualities. And then if you want something super funky, you can see Star Sign has gold and teal also. It's not just blue and purple. Also, Star Sign has an opaque base. And of course, beauties, any shade I recommend, if you don't want to use it in this location, you can use it in a different location. Like, for example, you can use X-Ray here and Star Sign for another shade in the palette if you want to keep it still in the palette. And here are the two shades away from direct light. I don't think the camera's capturing it, but both of these shades have tiny purple pink sparkles. To dupe our next shade, I chose Thunderbird from Sydney Grace, which is a beautiful deep matte gray. This next shade from the palette photos looks like it has a beautiful teal shift going to gold, going to pink. So of course, Star Sign that I showed you all earlier is an option, but if you don't have that one or you don't want to use that one, there are three other options I'm recommending. Emblem from Cleona is a natural possibility, which has all of those shifts. Another option is Oppy or Oppy from Terramoons, or if you don't have that one, Fairy Garden is another option. This one is from Glaminatrix. Here are the three shades. You can see that Oppy and Emblem are very similar. In fact, this makes me think I should do another one of my don't buy dupe videos comparing all shades with this kind of shift. If you want to see such a video, comment below so that I make it. But you can see that the teal to gold to that kind of like a light bronze pink coppery shade is happening in Emblem and Oppy. And then Fairy Garden has a much more warm tone green, but then it does also have the gold and the pink shift, but the pink shift is a lot more purpley. Either way, you can't go wrong with either of these shades, and they're so pretty. Yeah, as you can see, Emblem has a lot more vibrant magenta-y shift right there. Here are the three shades in indirect light. The last shade in the first row looks like a cool tone pinky purple, and for it I used Haven from Sydney Grace. Beauties, I have made a look with this palette in one of my to buy or not to buys. I'm tagging that video below if you want to check it out. Beauties, mentioning again that if I use the term glitter in any of my videos, we're not talking about unsafe glitter. These are mica-based glitters, not the plastic glitters that can cut your cornea. So these are not unsafe for the eyes. And that is kind of the same thing across my platform, okay? With that said, our first shade in the second row looks like it has a lot of tiny glitters in it that go pink to purple. And for it, I chose Glow from the Glitter Iridescent Multichrome collection of Cleona. And it feels like this shade would give us exactly that effect. You all should be able to see the purple pink shifts as well as all the tiny blue glitters throughout this shade. And this shade is pretty flaky, so for best effect, use it on a tacky base. And here's the shade Away from Direct Light. Unfortunately, the camera's not capturing all the glittery effects, but even Away from Direct Light is super, super glittery and sparkly. And then if I do this, you're gonna see a lot of blue. For the second shade in the second row, which is a beautiful periwinkle purple, I went to the Cashmere Forever palette of Colourpop and I picked the shade Wanted. Again, beauties, I want to show you all that you should not shy away from reusing shades from pre-made palettes that you own, particularly if those palettes are magnetic and you can easily pull those shades out. Again, for reference, all of Colourpop palettes are magnetic, all of Adept palettes are magnetic, all of Glaminatrix palettes are magnetic, all of Cleona palettes are magnetic, and at this point, almost all of Bella Beaute Bar palettes are magnetic. If I forgot any brand whose palettes are magnetic, please comment below for us to know. From the swatch photos online, this shade looks like yet another glittery iridescent multichrome that goes blue to purple. But then in some other photos, it looked like a holochrome or just a glittery silver. And I decided to pick a glittery silver because I didn't want repetitions. And this is Moonlit from Devinah. I love how my camera is capturing all the glitters. That means that this shade is just ultra glittery. This is Moonlit in Indirect Light. Again, super glittery. Our next shade in the palette is a light gray matte, and to dupe it, I picked There and Back from Sydney Grace. Next shade in the palette looks like yet another topper type multichrome that goes blue to purple. And we've had enough of those already, so I chose something completely different. This is Nightfall from Looxi Beauty, and it's a beautiful, beautiful shade. I thought this shade really goes with this palette. It's a beautiful metallic bluish teal shade that has a gold shift from some angles. You should be able to see the gold at the end there. In fact, it even has a hint of purple right there. For me, this kind of a shade in the palette would be very useful instead of yet another purple to blue toppery shimmer. Northeaster, which is a very deep blue matte, looks like an ideal pick for our next shade, which is the first shade in the third row. This shade is from Sydney Grace. The second shade in the third row looks like a pretty vibrant, shimmery shade that goes blue to purple, and possibly it has a hint of teal. For it, I picked two options. One is Moontide, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous multichrome from Terramoons. And if you don't have that one, Huff and Puff is another option from Looxi. But I have a feeling it's a lot harder to get this shade than Moontide. If you have Huff and Puff, it is an option for some other shades in the palette if you want to use it in some of the earlier shades that I talked about. Moontide is super vibrant and peacock feather-like, but it also has a tiny rainbow right there. And then Huff and Puff not only has a beautiful purple shift from that angle, it goes into a gorgeous blue. Let me see if I can catch the blue. You see that? And in fact, the blue is deeper than what I see on the viewfinder. You can see the blue shift of Huff and Puff a lot easier when it's away from the shade. You see that blue and how beautiful it is? Our next shade is a deep blurple, and for it I picked ink from Glam Shop. We're approaching the end, and for this second to last shade, I have two recommendations, which are both from Terramoons, and these are again a variation of purple to blue. I feel like almost everything in this palette is purple to blue, but I love giving you more recommendations and you can mix and match them however you want. Our first one is Multiverse, which is one of my favorites, and it's super sparkly and glittery. And the second one is Witch Broom Nebula, which I don't think I have ever swatched for you guys, so maybe this is a good opportunity to do that, and you can see how glittery this one is. In the swatch photos on Bella Beaute Bar's website, this shade looks super glittery, pretty much more glittery than all the shades I've swatched so far, and Multiverse is exactly that, a blue to purple that looks like it's made up of tiny glitters. But then I thought, well, what if you don't have Multiverse? What if you want to use something funky, or maybe you're tired of using yet another blue to purple? I mean, how many blue to purple shades do you need in a palette, right? So I thought, let's just throw a curveball and introducing Witch's Broom Nebula, which is, y'all, I don't know how to describe. This is a multichrome on steroid. Like, just look at all of the different shades. It almost looks like it has a deep base, and then it has a layer over it that goes teal to gold to sort of copper. But then it also has glitters all over. And then at this end, you get some other rainbowy colors. Yeah, it's a gorgeous shade and very difficult to describe, but I think it went with all the other shades in the palette. Also, I have a lot of blue variations in my Terramoons collection that I don't get to use often. So I was like, let me swatch this one for you all. Maybe you all get inspired or you like it. Maybe you want to use it instead of this shade or another shade. Or maybe you just see it and like it and want to own it. Either way, you can't go wrong with either of these two shades or any of the other shades I swatched already. And the last but not least shade in the palette is a black matte, which you all know I'm not a black matte fan. So I picked a black shimmer. This is North Coast, which is a very, very special shade from Sydney Grace. And frankly, although I call this shimmer, it's almost like a satin shade. It's a very special shade. It has an interesting texture. It's not super, super creamy. I also imagine this shade would be a great shade for just lining your eyes. But of course, if you don't have this shade, you can always just pull out a matte black from one of your Colourpop palettes. I can guarantee you have a matte black in one of your pre-made palettes. Please don't go buy a matte black just to dupe this palette. Beauties, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget a thumbs up. If you want me to dupe any other palette, write it in the comments below. If you want to watch more duping videos, my playlist should be recommended to you on the screen about now. I love you all. Have an awesome day, and until next time, bye!